Okay, hello, how are you? Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear and see you well, and there's still some participants joining, but why don't you get started, Alejandro?
You want me to wait a couple of minutes?
No, I think it's okay to start. We're now at 14.
Thank you, Eva. Well, I don't know if anybody knows me. My name is Alejandro Lopez. I'm CEO in Cedesa, Seguro Depósitos from Argentina. I'm now chairing the Executive Council of the IADI, and as well I'm the President of IADI. Thank you for joining us today in this review of the core principles for effective deposit insurance systems. As you may know, it's our most important document. It's our standards for the deposit insurance. And what we are trying to do in this year, it's completing the road of discussing these standards or these proposed standards with our most close stakeholders as IMF, World Bank, the FSB, and particularly in this occasion, we are very glad to receive you in this meeting today, where we are going to present this review that we have done. It's one of the last steps of a very long road that we were walking during this year, and we are expecting to, with all our membership, to approve these standards by the end of this year. But as we are much looking forward for that, there are some previous steps, and this is one very important one that we have to take. So thank you for being here today, and I expect that this will enlighten us all in a very elevated debate about our standards as deposit insurers. So I'm going back to Eva, to the presentation. Thank you again for being here this evening, this morning, this afternoon for all of you, and we'll hope that we can meet in person in the future. So Eva, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Eva Hüpkes, Secretary General of IADI, and I'm here with Bert from Roosebeke, who is our Senior Advisor on Analysis and Policy, and we will together give you an overview of the core principles of effective deposit insurance systems, the review process, the objectives of the review, the next steps, and how the core principles fit into the broader set of international standards promoting financial stability. The IADI Core Principles had first been adopted in 2009. At the time, it was an initiative jointly with the Basel Committee for Effective Banking Supervision. This was in the wake of the global financial crisis, and in 2014, this was after all these reforms, notably the key attributes had come into place. The IADI Core Principles have been revised for the first time. They serve as global benchmark for the effectiveness of deposit insurance systems, and they serve as an assessment and technical assistance tool for the IMF and World Bank when advising on the deposit insurance systems and practices, and they also form part of the key standard for sound financial systems. They're included in the FSB compendium of standards for sound financial systems, so representing a minimum requirement for good practices that countries are encouraged to adopt to promote financial stability. So you have to see these core principles together and look at them together with the Basel core principles for effective banking supervision and the key attributes for effective resolution regimes. So these three standards together form a comprehensive framework that promote the soundness of financial institutions, protect depositors, and maintain confidence in the financial system, and also support the effective resolution of financial institutions in a manner that preserves financial stability. So the 2025 review seeks to address basically three major areas. I mean, it reflects on the digital innovation, the evolving landscape in financial systems. It acknowledges the growing role of deposit insurers in resolution and reflects on the lessons learned from the banking turmoil, or considers the lessons learned from the banking turmoil in 2020. March 2023, the IADI had issued a report on those lessons, and these, in a way, form a basis, a foundation for this ongoing review of the core principles. And that said, the review also seeks to maintain consistent and complementarity with the FSB key attributes, the standard for resolution, and the Basel core principles, the standard for banking supervision. The review process was initiated in March last year. A high-level steering group led by the President and CEO of the Canadian deposit insurer, the CDIC, was established. This high-level steering group developed a proposal adopted by our ExCo in December, and then shared with our key international stakeholders, the IMF, World Bank, Basel Committee, and FSB for feedback. In light of the feedback received from these international stakeholders, further revisions were made to the proposal, and this is now the version that has been issued for public consultation. The public consultation will still run until the 14th of July, and you're all invited to share your observations and submit your comments. Well, the objectives of this review are basically fourfold. One, and these are all lessons that have been identified over the past decade or so, to stress more the interaction of the different components of the financial safety net. So in a way, promoting a holistic view of the financial safety net, acknowledging that while there are different institutional architectures for deposit insurance and resolution across jurisdictions, all these functions, supervision, resolution, deposit insurance, lender of last resort, need to work together effectively. And this view informs the view of the principles. Then secondly, I mean, we have seen an increase of increased number and the large majority of deposit insurers have a role in resolution, and this is this percentage of depositors with deposit insurers with role in resolution is steadily increasing. At the same time, non-payout resolutions are becoming the dominant way of resolving bank failures. So the interaction of deposit insurance and resolution is critical, and that is another objective that the core principles seek to make clear. Then another aim of the standard is to be ambitious and forward-looking. So not to have a standard that is already fully implemented in the majority of the jurisdiction, but set some aspiration and ambition. And fourthly, and quite importantly, the review objective is to future-proof the core principles. So we may see the emergence of digital alternatives to deposits, and which may mean that deposit insurance coverage need to be reconsidered, and the core principles should have that flexibility to allow for the application in a digitalized financial system. And so what Bert and I will do is walk you through those 4 objectives in some more detail and tell you what changes have been made to the core principles to achieve those 4 objectives. And maybe let me start with the first one, this holistic view of the financial safety net. We have the deposit insurer is defined as an entity responsible for providing deposit insurance or guarantees to insure deposit-taking institutions, whereas the deposit insurance system is referred to as the interaction between the deposit insurer and other safety net participants that support the deposit insurance functions and resolution process. And the current existing core principles are already the core principles for deposit insurance systems. But they have now been reordered to focus first on narrowly on the deposit insurer and then more widely on the system. And they place a stronger focus on cooperation, coordination, and information sharing amongst the safety net participants, and in addition, clarify the role of backstop arrangements, which are provided within or to be provided within financial safety net. But let me now turn over to Bert to elaborate a bit further on these objectives here.
Thank you very much, Eva. Hello, everybody. So on the more technical side of the story, so to say, Eva just mentioned the reordering of the core principles. So this slide shows you what this means in practice. So we try to group the core principles that apply specifically and directly to the deposit insurer. That would be the ones on the left here. And then a second block of core principles would apply more generally to the deposit insurance system. That's the block on your right here. I mean, this is not a wholesale change, right? So we try to minimize the disruption in the order. But just to give you a flavor, so the ones on the left, you know, these really cover the core functions of any deposit insurer globally, irrespective of the exact or concrete mandate. So that would include things like, you know, mandate, of course, of the deposit insurer, but then, you know, the bread and butter questions like membership coverage, funding, public awareness. So that's on the left side. On the right side, the more broad principles applying to the deposit insurance system would include questions like crisis preparedness and management, financial safety net cooperation. So questions that are of a bit more of a holistic nature. And overarching is core principle 1 on the public policy objectives. I can just read in the chat somebody writing that they cannot see the presentation. I can, so I would think this is on that specific user's side. So if somebody could gently, just type in the chat that they can see the presentation, that would make us relax a bit here. Let me just pause for a second. Okay, at least I have one person that can see the slides. Okay, there is some more that can see it. So to the ones that can't see it, maybe the easiest is just to disconnect and try to connect again. I guess that would be the easiest solution. Okay, I will continue then. So we have one overarching core principle in the public policy objectives, and then after that we would split the core principles applied to deposit insurers directly, and then the more broader ones to the system. See if I can move the slides now. I can. Okay, so the second topic that Eva mentioned under this first objective is concerning cooperation, coordination, and information sharing. So the core principles would set out that the deposit insurer must be a part of a formal framework within that financial safety net for cooperation, coordination, and information sharing. This as well is not totally new, so the existing version of the core principles already has quite a lot on that. And in this version, I mean, I think one could, what we can say is that the draft now in consultation is a bit more forward-looking and ambitious in that regard. That we really, stress the need to also cooperate and not just coordinate. So there is a bit more of expectation in that field. The frameworks I alluded to should set out the individual and the joint responsibilities of those actors involved, and that the deposit insurer is to both share and receive relevant information, mainly here from the supervisor before material action is taken. Maybe one specific case here at the bottom is the case where the deposit insurer is not the resolution authority. And for reasons that I will come back to later on, the core principles there set out explicitly that there should be appropriate arrangements in place, especially when this has a relevance for the funding of a non-reimbursement, the non-payout resolution by that deposit insurer. Final thing I would say is the third point under this objective relates to funding and public backstop. So what we try to do here in this version that is now under consultation is to make clear that in addition to the general funding requirements, there should be two separate additional extraordinary funding requirements. So the one on the left here relates to prearranged access to funding in some certain identified scenarios. The form this would mainly take is extraordinary contributions by the members of the deposit insurer, or any other form of market-related funding by the deposit insurer. For example, credit lines that could be activated. But this is to be in place, and in addition, and we separated this to make it clear and visible in the core principles, there should be a public backstop funding arrangement that should be set up in advance. The terms and conditions to activate this should be clear ex ante. We also made it very clear that although this is really important, it can by no means be a substitute for the traditional ex ante funding by the members of the deposit insurer. And of course, upon activation, any costs of repayment must be borne by the members of the deposit insurer. So I'll stop here and hand it back to Eva. I think you're on mute, Eva.
Thank you. The second objective of the review is to address the interaction of deposit insurance and resolution. And this is an area where we acknowledge some overlap both with the Basel core principles of effective banking supervision and the FSB key attributes, and the core principles state, well, that this is acknowledged, and I mean, for the purposes of assessment, so where there are assessments of the Basel core principles and the key attributes, though, assessors should refer to those assessments, and we say to make sure there is no overlap. The existing core principles already include reference to early intervention and resolution, and these principles have been strengthened in a way to focus on the essential elements of resolution regimes for small and medium-sized banks, with a view to maintaining continuity of the depositing function or facilitating a liquidation. And importantly, an amendment has been made to introduce, to say more about the modalities or criteria for the use of the Deposit Insurance Fund for non-reimbursement resolutions. So where, for instance, the funds are used to facilitate a transfer of deposits to another deposit-taking institution, then what are the terms and conditions for that? So this is the second objective of the review, and again back to Bert, who will elaborate on how this is being implemented in the core principles text.
Okay, thank you, Eva. So let me start with the first element you referred to, so early detection and timely intervention. So this is core principle 13 in the draft. And what the core principles here say is that there really must be an effective framework within the financial safety net for such early detection and timely intervention, and that the deposit insurer should be a part of that framework. If I mentioned the relevance and the overlap with two other main standards, Basel core principles and the FSB key attributes, so I think this is very relevant here in this core principle. So the draft explicitly acknowledges this overlap here in the field of supervision and resolution, of course, so Basel core principles and FSB key attributes, and clearly says that where there has been such a assessment of a jurisdiction's compliance with those two standards, the findings thereof should be taken into account when looking into the compliance of a jurisdiction with the IADI standard in this field. So I think very transparent and clear way of dealing with that overlap. One thing I would point out here is a new criteria that was included here in the middle bullet point. So these new criteria, these new essential criteria would set out that relevant recovery and resolution planning information is to be shared with the deposit insurer and other financial safety net participants in a timely and appropriate manner. So yes, so I'll invite you to have a close look at the language here. So I mean, it's carefully drafted. So we really discuss relevant information is the subject of sharing this, and this is to be done in a timely and appropriate manner. So we think this is a balanced approach, but does acknowledge the necessity of the deposit insurer to be adequately informed in this field. On the second point, if alluded to on the resolution, so this is core principle 14. So as in the current core principles, we stress that there must be a legal framework in place that includes a resolution regime with the adequate powers to maintain continuity of a deposit insurance function and to facilitate liquidation. I think it's important to stress two factors here. First, also in the updated introduction of the core principles, we again clearly acknowledge other standards. So in this case, the FSB key attributes, which by their mandate apply to financial institutions that are systemically significant or critical upon their failure. So that's well acknowledged, and the IADI core principles here relate mainly to small and medium-sized insured deposit taking institutions, so small and medium-sized financial institutions, and dealing with their failure. I think it's very relevant to point out that the core principles now have an overall objective when speaking about these resolution frameworks, namely that the aim is really to minimize disruption in access to insured deposits. I think this is also a lesson learned from the recent banking turmoil. And well, these measures can be twofold, right? So resolution actions can include both a payout, but also non-payout resolution action, and whatever action is taken, the aim should really be to minimize disruption in the access to those insured deposits. Yes, I mean, I talked on the overlap with the FSP key attributes and on using any findings of existing evaluations and assessments in that already in the previous slide, and that applies to the same extent, of course, in this function of resolution. On the use of funds, this is a very specific case. It relates to those institutional scenarios where the deposit insurer is not the resolution authority. And in that case, the legal frameworks that are in place in a given jurisdiction may allow the use of the deposit insurance funds in a resolution action, which we acknowledge. So that's all fine. The jurisdiction in place should have clear terms and conditions in place that govern the use of that funds, and what the core principles say. The main things that the core principles say here are highlighted in these three arrows here. So first of all, the deposit insurer should be in a position to confirm that any conditions that are set out in that relevant jurisdiction are actually met for the use of the funds in the scenario that I highlighted. Secondly, there should be an appropriate protection of the use of funds of the deposit insurer, typically through a safeguard that limits the use of those funds to the cost of the net payout counterfactual. So what the deposit insurer would have incurred as costs if there were to be a payout net of recoveries. And thirdly, that the use of the deposit insurer's funds in order to recapitalize a bank in resolution should be an exceptional scenario, and that should take place only following prior write-down of the equity of the bank in resolution. Okay, that's all I have to say for this moment. Back to Eva.
Okay, now to the third objective. The review should be forward-looking and include aspirational elements. In other words, our executive council decided, well, we want to be ambitious, and to be ambitious, this revised set of core principles includes so-called additional criteria. Additional criteria are aspirational, voluntary best practices that exceed the baseline expectations, which are the essential criteria, and the essential criteria are typically those that are used in assessments conducted by the IMF and World Bank as part of the FSAP, for instance. So these additional criteria should set out an aspiration to aim for, and there are additional criteria included in two areas: differential premium systems and reimbursement. But
yes, thank you, Eva. So let me start with the differential premium systems. Yeah, let me try to avoid some confusion here. So on the left side of the screen is the essential criteria. As Eva said, we have the core principles at a high level, and each core principle has essential criteria, which are, so to say, the standard, what is expected. And under these essential criteria, there has been already text on differential premium systems, and that has been slightly updated now. So what this mainly does is it's relevant for those jurisdictions where the deposit insurance currently uses differential premium systems. So premiums that are tailored to the individual risk that a member or institution would pose to the deposit insurer. So these are, so to say, minimum standards that would apply to any such system. Just some examples here. The deposit insurer needs to have access to relevant and timely information in order to conduct those risk assessments. There has to be sufficient differentiation between the different risks and hence the different premiums. There has to be some certain transparency to the members, etc. So this really applies to those jurisdictions that use such a system. So this is status quo, slightly updated. On the right side is what is really new, is the additional voluntary criteria. So this expresses an aspiration by the community to the deposit insurers, an aspiration to actually implement such a differential premium system, relevant, of course, mainly to those jurisdictions that currently do not have it yet. So it's a call to deposit insurers globally to work on implementing such a differential premium system. At the same time, we acknowledge that there may be scenarios where that is not feasible, not appropriate, not possible, for different reasons. And for this reason, there is a caveat in the text also calling upon all the members of the financial safety net to coordinate, to cooperate in order to enable the deposit insurer to actually do such premiums. The second element where the additional criteria applies to is a reimbursement by the deposit insurer. Same story here. Left side is updated status quo. Right side of the slide is actually new. So the status quo is continued in that sense. The expectation in the core principles is still that upon a payout scenario, most insured depositors must be reimbursed within 7 working days. Where that is not feasible, there should be plans in place to achieve this as soon as possible. So this is, I would say, no major change in the status quo. The changes in the right side, again, there is an aspiration set out that most insured depositors would actually be reimbursed or would regain access within 3 working days once the reimbursement has been triggered. This is ambitious, very ambitious to some of our members. For that reason, we have also added the call here on financial safety net participants to actively collaborate in order to eliminate all obstacles that are in place that may make it a bit of a challenge to actually reach this aim as of today. Okay, Eva, back to you.
Okay, and so let me move on to the fourth objective, that is to future-proof the core principles. And this is one covers 3 areas. One relates actually, well, to the scope or the terminology. I mean, to the current core principles referred to bank deposits. And already now, I mean, the core principles also apply to cooperatives, which are not quite banks, even though they're deposit-taking institutions. So we introduced a new term, which is the deposit-taking institution, or insured deposit-taking institution, IDTI, so as to ensure that different types of institutions are covered, including cooperatives. But it also, this new term also acknowledges that, I mean, the concept of deposit taking may change over time. The core principles do not define what an insured deposit is, but expect jurisdiction to conduct regularly reviews. And so this flexibility in the terminology should make it possible to adapt to financial innovation, digitalization, and if appropriate, and subject to appropriate safeguards like appropriate supervision to capture other types of institutions that offer deposit-like programs. Well, the other core principles, the other change relates to business continuity. I mean, also as a result of technological financial innovation, we see more and more operational risk has become more relevant for deposit insurers, and with that operational resilience, protections against cyber threats and IT failures, and so this therefore warranted the introduction of a standalone core principle on business continuity for deposit insurers. And finally, and that's certainly a lesson from the 2023 turmoil, we have seen the increased relevance also of social media, of also misinformation being spread easily across social media, the internet, social media challenges, and at the same time, the emergence of digital products that look like maybe insured deposits, but are not insured deposits. So there was a view that the public awareness and provisions against misstatements around the coverage by deposit insurance need to be strictly regulated, and so therefore this is another principles where we have included amendments, but again, Bert will give you more detail.
Thank you, Eva. On the concept of insured deposit-taking institutions, I think Eva already set out the motivation very clearly. The definition in the consultation draft is these are entities that are licensed in a certain jurisdiction, licensed to take insured deposits. At the same time, we explicitly added a very important safeguard, namely that these institutions must be subject to sound prudential regulation, supervision, and effective resolution regimes. In this regard, we refer actively in the text to the IADI Core Principles as a relevant benchmark for such prudential resolution and supervision. The direct consequence of being named as such an IDTI, insured deposit-taking institution in a certain jurisdiction, would be that this triggers membership in the deposit insurer. So this is really, I think, as Eva said, a possibility. We're making ourselves here, we're giving ourselves a possibility to adapt to technological change. So this is not to say that any other products than the classical bank deposits as of today must be covered by deposit insurers. It's explicitly not, so to say, the measures of the core principles, but it's, I think, giving us a possibility to adapt to any digital innovation and any consequences that may have to financial stability. In the end of the day, it's a decision by each relevant jurisdiction what a insured deposit is and how that is defined. So the core principles don't dwell on that. What they do entail is a requirement for that definition of insured deposit to undergo a periodic review in that jurisdiction. On the business continuity plan, yes, a reaction to increasing digitalization, cyber threats, etc. Also a reaction to the COVID pandemic, where we saw lockdowns and issues of operational continuity. So this is a totally new core principle that was not included in the previous set. I would argue like it helps a bit in the sense, or the added value I think is that it disentangles financial crisis from crisis occurring at the deposit insurer. So in the previous core principles, this was kind of like merged and joined in a core principle on contingency planning. In the draft consultation version, there is a clear core principle, this one here, that relates directly to deposit insurers, and another one more broadly that relates to crisis preparedness for financial market events. So I think that adds a bit to the clarity. On this core principle here, there is expectations, so there should be a framework in place at the deposit insurer that allows the maintenance of critical operations or the recovery as soon as possible. And that should include testing and training for employees and communication plans on how to deal with such events. And the final point is on the public awareness. So as if I said, the driver here was mainly technological innovation, new products, new issuers also of those products where it may not be fully clear whether the product itself is covered by deposit insurer or what the relationship of that issuer to the deposit insurer is. And there is a new essential criteria here that requires that the law should prohibit misleading or deceptive statements about who is actually a member of the deposit insurance system and what product is actually insured or covered by deposit insurance. Yeah, I think I'll stop here. Back to you, Eva.
Yeah, these were sort of the 4 areas where we thought to review, amend, hopefully improve the core principles, which are published for consultation. We welcome any comments, observations, suggestions anybody may have. We set out 4 questions for the consultation around those 4 objectives, asking whether, I mean, you believe that we achieve this objective of promoting the effective interaction between the different financial safety net actors, whether we provide sufficient clarity on the interaction between deposit insurance and resolution, whether core principles are sufficiently forward-looking and ambitious and actually do provide that adaptability and flexibility to evolve and adapt to technological change. So any written comments, suggestions can be submitted via our website, unless comments from external parties will be published on our website, unless you tell us they are confidential and you do not want them to be published. So let me quickly walk through the timeline and next steps. So the consultation closes on the 14th of July. We still have ongoing pilot testing. There are 3 jurisdictions where these core principles are currently tested: in the Americas, in Brazil, Kenya, and the Philippines. And our executive council will meet in September to review the feedback and discuss what changes, further changes should be made to the core principles, with a view having a final version for endorsement at our AGM in November in Lisbon. And with that, the work isn't done. I mean, there is also a handbook for the core principles, and that's a more detailed document that provides guidance to assessors with concrete examples to tell them, well, these practices align or do not align with certain core principle and criteria. So this handbook will also be reviewed. And this will happen in the course of next year. And once this is done, the first step will be for IADI members to be encouraged to conduct a self-assessment against this new set of core principles and the handbook. So with that, we have come to the end of our presentation, and but we still have some time left and are open to answer any questions anyone listening may have. Feel free to add it to the chat or just raise your hand in the webinar. So I don't see any comments. There was any questions. There is a question if we can make available the PowerPoint. I think we can do that after this. I'm looking to my colleagues. Do you see any comments? Maybe we have been comprehensive and clear.
I don't see any further line.
Well, then, with that, thank you for listening in, for your interest in the IADI Core Principles, and we very much look forward to hearing from you by the 14th of July.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you.